The cantina on Kepler Station was loud and full of trouble. The air smelled like cheap fuel, spilled drink, and sweat from 100 different species. Captain Victor Reeves sat at the bar with his boots planted on the metal floor and a drink in his hand. He was a large man with scars on his face and a cold smile that never reached his eyes. Around him, various creatures from across the galaxy tried to mind their own business, but Victor was not the kind of man people ignored. He was telling a story. More accurately, he was bragging. "I tracked them for 3 cycles," Victor said, his voice loud enough to cut through the background noise. He turned the glass in his hand, watching the amber liquid catch the neon light. "The targets were fast, I'll give them that. But fast does not mean invisible. Fast does not mean smart." A few beings at nearby tables shifted away, but a small group stayed close. They were mercenaries like him, the kind who took work that honest people turned down. They understood what Victor was describing. They wanted to hear it. "The colony was small," Victor continued. "Quiet place. Good hunting ground because nobody cares about frontier settlements. I landed my ship in the dead zone, outside their sensor range. Spent a day watching them. The Vex family had a routine. Morning work in the gardens. Afternoon maintenance of their structures. Evening meals together." He paused for effect, taking a long drink. "They had a cub," he said, and there was something cruel in the way he said it. "Maybe 8 cycles old in their years. Still soft. Still innocent. That kind always break the easiest when they realize what is happening to the ones they love." Kira sat 3 tables away, alone, with a single glass of clear liquid in front of her. She was not remarkable in any way. Her hair was dark and pulled back simple. Her clothes were practical but worn. She had the look of someone who worked with machines, not violence. No one would remember her face after she left. That was exactly how she wanted it. But she was listening. She had walked into this cantina because a contact told her Victor Reeves frequented this place. She came here once a week to drink and to brag, because men like Victor needed the attention. They needed to tell the galaxy what they had done. It was their weakness. It was how people like Kira found them. "I came in through the back entrance," Victor said. "They never heard me. I do good work. I do clean work. No mess, no complications. I found the parents in their sleeping chamber first. Made it quick. They did not suffer." He said this last part like it was a kindness, like he was proud of his mercy. "The cub was in the 2nd chamber. It was sleeping. I did not wake it. There was no need. I took the credits they had stored, took some supplies, and left. In 12 hours, the Vex colony would discover what happened. In 24 hours, they would be too shocked to respond. In 48 hours, I was off-world and invisible." Victor took another drink and looked around at his audience. Some of the mercenaries nodded, appreciating the efficiency of his work. Others just stared at their own glasses, not wanting to be associated with what he was saying. "The payment was good," Victor said. 50,000 credits for removing a threat to a corporate interest on that world. The client was never identified. The trail was never traced back. This is how professionals work. This is what separates the hunters from the hunted." He laughed then, a harsh sound that cut through even the loud cantina noise. Kira did not move. She did not react. She simply sat there and listened and memorized every word. She looked at Victor with the kind of attention that a hunter gives to prey. She noted his scars, his features, the way he moved. She watched how other people reacted to him, who his associates were, how many weapons she could see on his body. When Victor finally left the cantina, he did not notice the woman sitting alone at the distant table. Why would he? She was nobody. She was invisible. She was exactly what every predator believed their next victim would be. But Kira was already moving, already planning, already calculating the steps it would take to put a man like Victor Reeves in the ground where he could never hurt anyone again. She finished her drink slowly. She paid her bill in cash. She left a small tip. She did not rush or draw attention. She simply stood up and walked out into the corridor of Kepler Station, moving with the kind of quiet purpose that only someone with a real goal ever moves with. In her pocket was a small recording device. She had captured everything Victor said. More importantly, she had his voice, his location, his pattern. She knew he would be here again next week, sitting at the same bar, telling the same story to a new group of mercenaries. This was his routine. This was how men like him operated. They were creatures of habit, and they were careless because they believed themselves to be powerful. Kira stepped out into the spaceport and looked up at the massive ships docked at the stations. She thought about the Vex cubs somewhere on a frontier colony, waking up alone in a world that no longer made sense. She thought about the extended family taking in a child broken by loss. She thought about how the galaxy worked, how the powerful took what they wanted, and the weak simply suffered. Then she thought about what humans could do when they decided to act. Not with weapons or power, but with patience and will and a cold understanding that justice sometimes had to be delivered by hand. Kira pulled up a communications device and sent a simple message to a contact on the Vex colony. The message had no words, just coordinates and a timestamp. The other person would understand what it meant. She had found him. Now she would hunt him. And when she was finished, Victor Reeves would be as silent as the parents he had murdered, and the galaxy would be a slightly safer place for the ones too weak to fight back. The investigation took time. Time was the one thing Kira had in abundance. She left Kepler Station and made her way through the human networks that existed in the shadows of the galactic community. These were people who did not exist in official records, who worked outside the system, who understood that justice in space was often a personal matter. Her first contact was Marcus, a human who ran data from a station near the outer rim. He was old now, older than he should have been, with hands that shook from too many stimulants and eyes that saw everything. When Kira came to his office, he did not ask questions. He simply listened and then got to work. "Victor Reeves," Marcus said, pulling information across his screens. Not his real name. Real name is David Porter. Born on Earth, but he left the home world when he was young. Has worked as a contract killer for at least 15 years. Estimated body count is somewhere between 70 and 150 targets. We do not know the exact number because he works for clients who pay for silence. Kira sat across from him and listened. She did not take notes. She did not need to. Her memory was excellent, and her focus was absolute. The interesting thing, Marcus continued, is that he has never been arrested, never been officially investigated by any authority. He is like a ghost. The credits he receives move through so many channels that tracking them is almost impossible. But he has patterns. He always surfaces on the same stations. He drinks at the same cantinas. He trusts certain dealers for weapons and supplies. Marcus pulled up a map showing Victor's movement across the last 2 years. "If you want to find him," Marcus said, "you watch the pattern. He takes a contract. He completes it. He disappears for a time. He reappears on one of these stations. He gets drunk. He brags. He takes another contract. The cycle repeats." Kira absorbed this information and understood what it meant. Victor was arrogant and stupid, which was dangerous. But he was also reliable, which meant he was killable. A target without patterns was nearly impossible. A target with habits could be predicted. "How much?" Kira asked. "For you," Marcus said, "nothing. I lost a daughter to someone like him. Not killed by him specifically, but his type. Humans like you are what keep the predators from consuming everything. So you take this information. You use it. You end him if you can. Kira left the station with coordinates and dates and the names of 7 different locations where Victor was known to operate. She had resources now. She had information. What she needed next was connection to the Vex colony. It took her 4 weeks to reach the frontier settlement. The journey was long and hard, moving through irregular space routes that were not well mapped. The planet itself was harsh, with red soil and sparse vegetation. The colony was small, just a few hundred individuals, living in reinforced structures built to withstand the difficult environment. When Kira arrived, she made her way to the residential district and asked for the family of the deceased Vex. They were easy to find. In a small colony, everyone knew about tragedy like this. The extended family lived in a shared structure. When Kira introduced herself as a human interested in the case, they were cautious at first. Humans were not common on frontier colonies, and they had reason to distrust outsiders. But Kira was direct and honest. She told them she knew who had killed the parents. She told them she intended to do something about it. The family brought her to see the cub. The young Vex was small, barely reaching Kira's waist. Its color patterns showed the marks of mourning, a biological response among the Vex that indicated deep grief. The cub had eyes that were too old for its body, eyes that had seen the kind of loss that changed creatures forever. "What is your name?" Kira asked, kneeling down to the cub's level. "Corin," the cub said quietly. "I am Corin." "I am Kira," she said. "I want you to understand something. The human who killed your parents made a mistake. He told people what he did. He bragged about it. And now someone is going to make sure he pays for it." The cub did not respond immediately. Then it asked, "Are you going to kill him?" Kira did not lie to the child. "Yes," she said simply. "I am going to make sure he never kills anyone else again. Your parents were good creatures. They did not deserve what happened. No one does." The adult Vex gathered around. They were a tall species with elongated features and scales that shimmered in the light. They had strength, but not the kind that could reach across the stars to hunt a human mercenary. They had resources, but not the kind that could navigate the complex underworld that Victor inhabited. "We do not know how to pay you," the eldest Vex said. "We have small amount of credits, but it is not much." "I do not want credits," Kira said. "I want information. Tell me everything you know about this planet, about Victor's contract, about who hired him to do this work." The Vex provided what they knew, which was limited but useful. A corporate interest had wanted the parents removed because they were union leaders who had resisted corporate expansion into their settlement. The contract had been offered through hidden channels. The corporate entity had never been identified, but the pattern suggested it was one of 3 possible companies. Kira took this information and integrated it with what Marcus had given her. She was building a picture now, a map of Victor's world and his movements. She spent a week on the colony, helping the family, sitting with Corin, answering questions about the human world. Then she left, carrying with her a small token that Corin's parents had once owned. It was a simple carved object, shaped like the sun of the Vex homeworld. Kira put it in her pocket and carried it like a reminder of why she was doing this. She had Victor's location. He would be on a station called Forge in 12 days, collecting payment for his recent work. He would be drinking and bragging and feeling powerful because no one had stopped him yet. Kira would change that. She would be the consequence that predators always feared but never expected. The hunt was beginning now. The real hunt. And unlike Victor, Kira would not make the mistake of underestimating her opponent. She would not grow arrogant. She would not celebrate until the work was finished. She would move with the kind of focus and precision that separated hunters from the hunted dot. She would end him quietly, and the galaxy would never know exactly what happened, which was exactly how it should be. Forge Station was nothing like the cantina on Kepler. It was a harsh industrial center where raw materials were processed into usable components. The air tasted like metal dust and recycled air that had been cleaned 1,000 times too many. The population was rough, the work was brutal, and people did not ask questions about the past of their neighbors. Kira arrived 4 days before Victor was scheduled to arrive. She had confirmed his location through Marcus and another contact, a Terran named Kelly, who worked in the transport industry. Victor had booked passage to Forge on a specific ship, and his usual pattern suggested he would spend 3 days on the station before moving on to his next contract. Kira rented a small room in the worker district, the kind of place where no one cared who stayed there or what they did. She paid in cash and gave a false name. She did not interact with the landlord beyond what was necessary. She was the kind of tenant who left no impression, no memory, nothing for anyone to report later. From her room, she began her preparation. The compound where Victor stayed was on the edge of the station, a private facility that rented out secure quarters for mercenaries and other dangerous individuals who needed isolation. Kira spent 2 days watching the location. She memorized the guard rotations, the security systems, the entry points, and the exit routes. She identified 3 different ways into the building and 5 different ways out. She purchased equipment, thermal imaging tools, lock bypass devices, communication blockers, weapons that were quiet and efficient. She bought supplies from different vendors so that no single person would be able to reconstruct the pattern of her purchases. She paid for everything in untraceable currency and left no digital footprint. On the evening of Victor's arrival, Kira sat in her room and reviewed her plans. She had contingencies for contingencies. If Victor ran toward the north exit, she had a trap prepared. If he barricaded himself in his quarters, she had tools to bring the door down. If he tried to call for backup, she had devices that would block all communication signals in a 200-meter radius. She was not going to fail. She had come too far and learned too much. She had made a promise to a small Vex cub whose world had been destroyed. She would keep that promise. The storm came that night, exactly as Kira had anticipated. The weather on Forge was unpredictable, but seasonal patterns suggested a dust storm would occur within this time frame. When hit, visibility dropped to nearly zero, and the wind became a constant roar against the station structures. Kira moved through the darkness and the dust like she was part of it. She was human, and humans were adaptable in ways that other species were not. She could move in conditions that would blind others. She could hear through noise that would deafen others. She could hunt in environments that would make others helpless. She approached the compound from the side where the wind would cover her sounds. The security system was good, expensive, and well-maintained, but it was also old. Kira had studied schematics of the facility purchased from a corrupt maintenance worker. She knew every detail of the system. She bypassed the first layer of security with her tools. The alarm did not sound. The cameras did not activate. She moved like a ghost through the exterior perimeter and found the service entrance that she had identified during her observation period. The lock on the service entrance took her 4 minutes to work through. 4 minutes of careful manipulation of tiny mechanisms. 4 minutes of focus and precision. When the lock finally gave way, she was inside the compound and moving toward the residential section where Victor would be staying. The interior of the compound was dim. Security lighting ran on minimal power to conserve energy. Kira moved through the corridors with her weapon drawn, her thermal imager showing her the locations of the few guards on duty. 2 men in the main security station. 1 man on the east corridor. No one near the residential quarters. She took out the guard on the east corridor first. He did not see her coming. He did not have time to sound an alarm. He simply fell, unconscious but alive. Kira did not kill unless she had to, and she did not have to kill guards. She only needed to reach Victor. The residential quarters were at the end of the west corridor. Kira knew from observation that Victor occupied room 7, a private suite with a sleeping chamber and a secondary chamber for weapons storage. She approached the door and listened. She could hear movement inside, the sound of someone moving around, not sleeping yet. She used another device to unlock the door. It was a more complex lock than the service entrance, designed to prevent exactly this kind of intrusion. It took her 8 minutes to work through. 8 minutes standing in the corridor, exposed and vulnerable. 8 minutes where every second felt like an eternity, because she knew that if anyone discovered her now, the entire operation would be compromised. When the lock finally clicked open, she heard Victor inside the chamber. "Who is there?" he called out. He was suspicious now. He had heard something, though he could not know what. Kira did not hesitate. She moved through the door fast and low, her weapon already raised. Victor was moving toward his personal weapons locker, reaching for a gun that was mounted on the wall. He was fast, faster than most humans had any right to be. But Kira was faster. She had spent years training for exactly this moment. She had spent weeks planning for exactly this situation. She fired a non-lethal round that caught Victor in the shoulder, spinning him away from his weapons. He screamed and fell to one knee, shock registering on his face. He was used to being the hunter. He was not used to being hunted. "You," Kira said, and her voice was cold and clear, "are going to tell me about every contract you have completed in the last 15 years. Victor looked at her, and something like understanding crossed his face. He realized what she was. He realized what this meant. "Who sent you?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "A cub," Kira said. "A child whose parents you murdered on a frontier colony. A Vex child who will grow up in a world that you tried to destroy. That is who sent me." She saw the color drain from Victor's face as he understood. She saw him try to calculate his options, to think of ways to escape this situation. But there were no options. There was no escape. There was only the consequence that finally, after so many years of killing, had arrived in the form of a human woman who simply wanted justice. "Please," Victor said. "No," Kira replied. And she moved forward to do what she had come to do. The confrontation in Victor's quarters lasted only minutes. What Kira had to do was not complicated. It did not require elaborate tactics or extended violence. It required only will and the ability to follow through with what needed to be done. Victor tried to fight. He was a trained combatant, a man who had killed numerous times and believed himself to be superior in strength and skill. He was wrong. Kira had advantages that went beyond physical capability. She had the advantage of preparation. She had the advantage of knowing what was coming. She had the advantage of a clear objective and complete moral certainty. When Victor tried to reach for his backup weapon, Kira moved faster. When he tried to run toward the door, Kira anticipated the movement and cut off his escape. When he tried to negotiate, offering credits and information in exchange for his life, Kira did not listen. She pinned him against the wall of his own quarters. She looked into his eyes and saw the moment when he understood what was about to happen. She saw the moment when he realized that his reputation, his speed, his experience as a killer meant nothing now. He was prey, and prey did not survive when the hunter was ready to strike. "The Vex cub's name is Corin," Kira said quietly. "Corin will grow up knowing that someone cared enough to act. Someone cared enough to cross the galaxy and end the thing that destroyed its family. That cub will know that humans are not the soft, weak creatures that the galaxy believes us to be. We are the ones who remember. We are the ones who act when others will not. Victor tried to speak, tried to beg, tried to offer something of value. But Kira had moved beyond words. She had moved beyond negotiation or discussion. She was past the point where anything Victor said could change what was about to happen. She applied pressure to his neck in a way that was both fast and efficient. She had studied anatomy, studied the weak points in the human body, studied the methods that other humans had developed over millennia for ending life. This was not her first act of violence, though it would be the most significant. She moved with the kind of practiced efficiency that only someone with absolute training and absolute commitment could manage. Victor struggled. He fought. His body rejected what was happening and tried to survive through pure animal desperation. But the outcome was already determined the moment Kira had entered his quarters. He was already dead. He simply had not stopped moving yet. When he finally went still, Kira held position for another 30 seconds, ensuring that death was complete and there was no possibility of revival. Only then did she release him and let his body fall to the floor. The quarters were mostly undamaged. There was no grand mess, no obvious signs of struggle. The body lay on the floor, and that was all. No blood splattered on walls. No furniture destroyed. No evidence of a prolonged battle. Just a man on the ground who would never hurt anyone again. Kira checked her weapons. She was unharmed. She checked her surroundings. The alarm system had not been triggered. The guards outside had not moved toward this location. The storm was still raging outside, covering any sounds that might have been made. She moved to Victor's weapons locker and examined his arsenal. She found contracts, records of payments, names of clients. She found evidence of at least 67 murders that Victor had committed over his career. She found records of corporate interests, hidden shell companies, and the names of people who had hired him to eliminate threats to their power and profits. She took photographs of these documents with a small device. She would forward them to the authorities, not because she trusted the authorities, but because information was a weapon, and spreading the truth was another way of ensuring that the predators in the galaxy understood they were being watched. Then she turned back to Victor's body and removed his personal identification. She took his weapons. She gathered anything that linked him to specific locations or contacts. She was methodical about it. She did not rush. She did not panic. She simply worked through the process of making sure that the evidence against Victor would be scattered and difficult to trace back to her. She left the compound the same way she had entered. The guards did not notice her departure. The security system did not register her exit. She moved through the dust storm and back to her room in the worker district. Once in her room, she removed her protective gear and burned it in a disposal unit. She cleaned her weapons carefully. She erased the traces of her presence from the room. She gathered her few possessions and prepared to leave Forge Station. By morning, the storm had passed and Victor's body would be discovered. The authorities would find evidence of a struggle. They would find his weapons and his accumulated wealth. They would begin investigating, but they would find nothing that pointed to Kira. She had been careful. She had thought through every detail. When they searched the station, they would find no record of her arrival because she had paid in untraceable currency and used a false name. When they tried to identify witnesses who had seen her, they would find people who could not describe her face because she had been forgettable and careful. Victor Reeves, also known as David Porter, would simply be another dangerous man who had been eliminated in the shadows of space. No one would know exactly how or why. No one would be able to connect it to a Vex cub on a frontier colony. No one would understand that a single human woman had done this because a child needed to know that the galaxy contained justice. But Corrin would know. The Vex family would know. And that was all that mattered. As Kira left her room for the last time, She looked at the personal items she had collected. She placed the carved object that Corin's parents had once owned back in her pocket. She had carried it throughout her time on Forge as a reminder. Now she would carry it back to the Vex colony and return it to the cub as proof that the work was done. She moved through the station corridors like any other human worker. She boarded a transport ship like any other passenger. She paid for her ticket and settled into her seat and prepared for the journey ahead. Behind her on Forge Station, people were beginning to discover Victor's body. Alarms were sounding. Authorities were being called. Investigations were being initiated. But Kira was already gone, already transitioning to the next phase of her life. She had done what she set out to do. She had ended the man who had bragged about killing an innocent family. She had proven that there was no safe place in the galaxy for predators, no refuge from consequence, no escape from the humans who remembered. And somewhere on a frontier colony, a young Vex cub would wake up knowing that someone had cared enough to act. The journey back to the Vex colony took longer than the journey away. Kira had to move carefully, taking routes that did not draw attention and ports where tracking systems were less sophisticated. She could not risk being identified or connected to Victor's death. The investigation on Forge Station would continue for weeks, but it would eventually go cold. There would be no clear suspect. There would be no way to connect the killing to anyone specific. This was how justice worked in the shadows of space. Not with arrests and trials and public declarations. Not with official records and accountability. Simply with the knowledge that predators would die, and the systems that protected them would never understand how or why. Kira spent the long journey in her ship's quarters, reviewing what she had learned. She studied the documents she had photographed from Victor's quarters. She had found records of 16 different clients who had hired him. She had found evidence of corporate connections and political influences. She had found proof that the entity that had ordered the killing of the Vex, Cub's parents, was a resource extraction company called Terramar Holdings. She would send this information to contacts in human intelligence networks. She would ensure that these names and records reached people who could use them. She would not seek credit or recognition. She would simply put the truth into the universe and let others decide what to do with it. When the Vex colony finally appeared on her sensors, Kira felt something that might have been satisfaction. Not joy exactly, but a sense of work completed. A sense of a promise kept. The colony was quiet when she landed. The red dust covered everything with a thin layer of rust-colored powder. The structures of the settlement rose from the ground like stubborn stone monuments to persistence in a harsh environment. Kira did not go to any authority figures. She did not report to the colony leadership. She simply made her way to the family quarters where the Vex cub had been staying. The family recognized her immediately. They had not expected her to return. Most humans did not return once they left such places. Most humans did not care about the outcomes of their actions. They were surprised to see her. "It is done," Kira said simply. "The one who killed your family is dead. He will kill no one else." The adult Vex did not ask for details. They did not ask what had happened or how she had managed it. They seemed to understand that some things were better not discussed. Some actions existed in the space between words and accountability. "Corin is in the garden," the eldest Vex said. "The cub has been waiting. We told it that you said you would return." Kira made her way through the settlement to the garden area where the Vex grew food in carefully constructed terraces. The harsh climate limited what could be cultivated, but the Vex had adapted and created systems that worked with the environment rather than against it. It was a lesson that Kira had learned in her own way. Humans survived because they adapted. Corin was sitting on one of the stone benches, looking at the distant horizon where the sun was beginning to set in a way that turned the sky orange and purple. The cub was small still, but there was something stronger about it than there had been before. Grief did not diminish with time, but it changed shape. It became something that the carrier could live with. "You came back," Corin said, without turning to look at Kira. "I said I would," Kira replied. She sat down on the bench next to the cub. "Is he dead?" Corin asked. The cub's voice was quiet but steady. "Yes," Kira said. There was no point in softening this truth. The cub deserved directness. "He is dead. He will never hurt anyone else again." Corin turned then and looked at Kira with eyes that contained both sorrow and something that might have been relief. "I do not feel happy," the cub said. "I thought I would feel happy, but I just feel sad still. Knowing he's dead does not bring them back." "No," Kira agreed. "It does not. Nothing brings people back once they are gone. But it means something. It means the one who caused the harm will never cause it again. It means someone cared enough about your family to act. It means you are not alone in the universe." Kira reached into her pocket and removed a carved object that Corin's parents had once owned. She held it out to the cub. "This was taken by the one who killed them," Kira said. "I found it in his quarters. I took it back." Corin reached out with trembling hands and took the object. The cub held it like it was the most precious thing in the universe, which to the child it was. "Thank you," Corin whispered. "You do not need to thank me," Kira said. "I did what needed to be done. I did it because your parents mattered. I did it because you matter. I did it because the galaxy needs to understand that there are consequences for hunting the innocent." They sat together as the sun continued to set, watching the colors change in the sky. Kira thought about what she had done and why she had done it. She thought about the nature of justice and how it often operated in places where law could not reach. Humans were strange creatures in a galaxy dominated by species that focused on resources and power. Humans cared about things like honor and vengeance and protecting the young. Humans would cross the galaxy to right a wrong, even if there was no profit in it and no official authority to order them to do so. This was why humans were dangerous. Not because they had better weapons or superior technology, but because they would sacrifice everything for an idea. They would kill for justice. They would die for strangers. They would move through the darkness and the danger because someone needed them to. As the sun disappeared below the horizon and the twin moons of the Vex world began to rise, Kira stood to leave. "Will you come back?" Corin asked. "I do not know," Kira said honestly. "The universe is large and my path is uncertain. But you should know that you are never truly alone. There are humans across the galaxy who will remember what happened to you. There are humans who care. If you ever need help, if you ever face danger that you cannot overcome alone, send a signal. Someone will come. Someone always does." Kira left the cub with that promise. She made her way back to her ship. She entered the coordinates for her next destination into the navigation system. She had other work ahead. There were other innocents who needed protection and other predators who needed to understand that the galaxy contained justice. As she lifted off from the Vex colony, Kira looked back at the planet below. Somewhere down there, a cub was holding a carved object and understanding that the universe was not as hopeless as it had seemed. Somewhere down there, a family was processing the knowledge that consequences sometimes did reach the guilty. Kira set her course and engaged her faster than light engines. The ship jumped into hyperspace and disappeared from the Vex world. The galaxy would not record what had happened. The official records would show only that a mercenary named Victor Reeves had been found dead on Forge Station and that his killer had never been identified. But in the shadows and the hidden networks and the places where humans operated beyond the sight of authority, the story would spread. There was a human woman who hunted those who hurt children. There was a human woman who remembered. There was a human woman who would cross the galaxy to ensure that justice was served to those the law could not touch. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, other predators would hear this story and feel the first touch of fear. They would understand that there was no refuge. They would understand that bragging about their crimes in a cantina might put them in the sight of someone who cared enough to act. The galaxy was dark and cruel, but it was not without defenders. It was not without those willing to step into the shadows and do what needed to be done. And as long as there were creatures like Kira willing to hunt the hunters, the young and the innocent would have a chance at survival. This was what it meant to be human. Not strength or power or superior technology. It was the willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers. It was the ability to remember. It was the cold determination to see justice done, no matter the cost. And somewhere on the frontier colony of the Vex, a cub named Corin would grow up knowing that the universe contained justice. Not the kind that came from official channels or authorities that did not care, but the kind that came from a human who remembered and acted and asked nothing in return, but the knowledge that a wrong had been made right. This was how the galaxy truly worked. This was the real power that humans possessed. And this was why, despite being a relatively young species without superior weapons or vast resources, humans were quietly feared across the known universe. They would not abandon the weak. They would not forget injustice. They would not stop until the guilty faced consequence. And there was nothing more dangerous in the galaxy than that.